This is the story of a woman who killed her husband at their gender reveal party. But it's not about what you think. It's not about jealousy or rage or money. It's about something far more terrifying. What happens when someone owns you so completely, you forget you ever had a choice? What happens when survival looks like murder? And what happens when the only thing you have left to fight for is a name? Before we go any further, if stories that reveal the uncomfortable truth behind closed doors matter to you, hit subscribe right now. The witness wall exists for stories like this. Stories that ask hard questions and refuse easy answers. Subscribe and let's bear witness together. Now, to understand how we got to that blood-stained kitchen, we need to go back to where it started. When officers arrived at 847 Maple Ridge Drive on a Saturday evening, they expected noise complaints, maybe a domestic disturbance. What greeted them instead was a house suspended between celebration and catastrophe. Pink confetti littered the hardwood floors like fallen petals. A gender reveal cake sat half destroyed on the dining table, its frosting smeared across white linen. Streamers hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in the breeze from the open back door. And Daniel Brooks lay motionless on the kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath his head, mixing with champagne from a shattered bottle. Ava sat in the corner, her back against the refrigerator, one hand cradling her pregnant belly. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. Pink powder from the smoke cannon still clung to her dress. When the first officer approached, she didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply pointed at the glass centerpiece on the floor, its edges dark with blood. The music was still playing. A soft melody about childhood innocence, now grotesque in context. But this moment didn't begin with violence. It began months earlier, with a smile that hid everything. 3 years before that night, Ava Mitchell met Daniel Brooks at a corporate fundraiser in downtown Charlotte. He was charming in the way people are when they've practiced it, when every gesture has been calculated to disarm. He made her laugh. He listened, or seemed to. He asked about her dreams, her family, her favorite books. By the end of the night, he'd asked for her number with a confidence that felt magnetic. Their relationship moved quickly. Dates became weekends. Weekends became shared keys. Within 8 months, they were engaged. Ava's mother expressed concern about the speed, but Ava dismissed it. She was 27, independent, and sure she knew what love looked like. The wedding was beautiful. Daniel spared no expense. White Roses, a string quartet, vows he'd written himself that made half the guests cry. Ava felt like she was starring in someone else's fairy tale. The shift started small. A comment about her outfit being too casual for dinner with his colleagues. A suggestion that she didn't need to see her friends so often. He began checking her phone, casually at first, claiming he just wanted to make sure she was safe. When she questioned it, he'd pull her close and say, "I just love you so much. I can't imagine losing you." Love became a cage with invisible bars. By their first anniversary, Ava had learned which topics to avoid, which friends to distance herself from, which version of herself to present when they were in public. She became fluent in reading his moods, the slight tightening of his jaw that meant she'd said the wrong thing, the way his smile would freeze when she spoke to another man. When she told him she was pregnant, he cried. Real tears, she thought. He held her and promised he'd be the best father in the world. For a moment, she believed the man she'd met 3 years ago had returned. She was wrong. Daniel Brooks had built his entire life around perception. His career as a marketing executive depended on selling narratives, on convincing people that surfaces told the whole story. He approached his marriage the same way. Their social media presence was curated with the precision of an advertising campaign. Weekend hiking photos where Ava smiled at the camera while Daniel kissed her temple. Anniversary posts with long captions about gratitude and partnership. Every holiday was documented, every milestone celebrated publicly. Their followers commented with heart emojis and couple goals declarations. Friends told them they were lucky to have found each other. Daniel's co-workers praised him for being so devoted. Behind the camera, Ava held her breath. She learned to angle her body to hide bruises. She memorized which sweaters had long enough sleeves. She became an expert at concealer, not for beauty, but for survival. When her sister Emily visited, Ava would rehearse conversations in her head, practicing casual responses to avoid revealing too much. Daniel monitored everything. He checked her texts while she showered. He installed tracking software on her phone, disguised as a security app. He insisted on knowing her schedule down to the minute, calling it concern rather than control. At dinner parties, he would rest his hand on her knee beneath the table, squeezing just hard enough to remind her to laugh at his jokes, to agree with his opinions, to play the role of the adoring wife. Ava became two people, the woman in the photos, and the woman who flinched when doors slammed. When the pregnancy began to show, Daniel's obsession with their image intensified. He scheduled professional maternity photo shoots. He posted updates about the baby's development, narrating their journey to parenthood with the enthusiasm of a man who genuinely believed his own performance. But in private, he made it clear, this child belonged to him. His legacy, his story to tell. The ultrasound appointment fell on a rainy Tuesday in October. Ava had circled the date on the calendar weeks in advance, her anticipation building despite everything else. This was her child to. This was something Daniel couldn't script entirely. When the technician smiled and said, "Congratulations, it's a girl," Ava felt something shift inside her. A daughter. She'd been hoping for a daughter. Daniel squeezed her hand, his grip tight. "A girl," he repeated, his voice carrying an edge she recognized. "My little girl." That night, lying in bed, Ava whispered the name she'd been holding close since childhood. Lena Grace. "I've always loved that name." Daniel didn't respond immediately. He was scrolling through his phone, checking messages. Then, without looking at her, he said, "We're naming her Danielle." Ava turned to face him. "What?" "Danielle. After me. It's perfect." He set his phone down, finally meeting her eyes. "It shows she's mine. That she comes from me. But I thought we could talk about names together." His jaw tightened. That familiar signal. "We just did. Her name is Danielle." Ava's throat closed. She wanted to argue, to insist that she had a say, that her daughter deserved a name chosen with love, not ownership. But the look in Daniel's eyes stopped her. She'd seen that look before, right before things escalated. "Okay," she heard herself say. The word tasted like ash. Daniel smiled, satisfied. "Good. I'll start telling people tomorrow." That night, Ava went to the nursery they'd been preparing. Boxes of baby clothes sat unopened. A crib Daniel had assembled himself stood in the corner. She sat on the floor and cried quietly, her hand on her belly. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her daughter. "I'm so sorry." Over the following weeks, every time someone asked about the baby's name, Daniel would answer before Ava could speak. "Danielle," he'd say proudly. "After her father." Ava stopped trying to correct him. She stopped mentioning Lena Grace aloud. But in her mind, in the quiet moments when she felt the baby kick, she'd whisper it. Lena Grace. Your name is Lena Grace. It became her secret, the one thing Daniel couldn't take. Not yet. Emily Mitchell had always been protective of her younger sister. Growing up, she'd been the one to check under beds for monsters, to walk Ava home from school, to teach her how to stand up to bullies. So when Ava started dating Daniel, Emily watched carefully. At first, she liked him. He was attentive, successful, seemingly devoted. But over time, small things caught her attention. The way Daniel answered questions directed at Ava. How Ava's laughter had changed, becoming more performative. The fact that Ava rarely called anymore unless Daniel was at work. The first real alarm came during a family dinner 6 months into the pregnancy. Emily noticed Ava wearing a turtleneck in July. When they were alone in the kitchen, Emily touched her sister's arm. Are you okay? Ava's smile was too quick. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? You seem different. I'm pregnant and everything feels different. But Emily wasn't convinced. She started paying closer attention. She noticed how Ava would glance at Daniel before answering simple questions. How she'd apologize for things that didn't warrant apologies. How her texts became shorter, less personal. One afternoon, Emily called when she knew Daniel would be at work. Talk to me, Ava. Really talk to me. There was a long pause. Then quietly, I'm fine. Just tired. Ava. I have to go. Daniel will be home soon. That phrase, Daniel will be home soon, repeated in Emily's mind like a warning bell. She started keeping records. Screenshots of Ava's brief texts. Notes about conversations that felt rehearsed. She told herself she was being paranoid, but the feeling in her gut only grew stronger. When Emily learned about the name situation, it crystallized everything. Ava had mentioned it once, quickly, during a phone call. He wants to name her Danielle. I wanted Lena, but what? It doesn't matter. It's fine. Ava, it's your daughter too. You get a say. Silence. Then, do I though? Those 3 words haunted Emily. She confronted Ava during a rare solo visit, when Daniel was on a business trip. You don't sound happy. You don't sound like yourself. If something's wrong, you can tell me. I'll help you. Ava's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. You don't understand. It's complicated. Then uncomplicated. Leave him. It's not that simple. He'd never let me go. And the baby. She placed a hand on her belly. He says if I try to leave, I'll lose her. He has lawyers, money, connections. I can't risk it. Emily felt her blood run cold. Ava, that's not love. I know what it is. Ava's voice was hollow. But knowing doesn't change anything. After that conversation, Emily started making plans. She researched lawyers, shelters, custody laws. She recorded conversations with Ava, documenting the timeline. She didn't know exactly how she'd help, but she was determined to be ready. She just hoped she wouldn't be too late. The gender reveal party was Daniel's idea, naturally. He planned every detail, the venue, the guest list, the color scheme, even the exact moment when the smoke would be released. Ava was a prop in his production. The day arrived bright and warm. Their backyard had been transformed into an Instagram paradise. White balloons formed an arch over the patio. A table displayed cupcakes with question marks, waiting for the big reveal. Friends and family arrived with gifts and excitement, their phones ready to capture the moment. Ava wore a white dress Daniel had chosen. It was beautiful and uncomfortable, the fabric tight across her growing belly. She'd spent an hour on her makeup, not because she wanted to, but because she knew Daniel would comment if it wasn't perfect. As guests mingled, Daniel played the role of the proud father flawlessly. He made jokes, he thanked everyone for coming, he wrapped his arm around Ava's waist and kissed her cheek for the cameras. To anyone watching, they were the picture of happiness. But as Ava held the smoke cannon, waiting for the countdown, Daniel leaned close and whispered in her ear, "Remember, her name is Danielle. If anyone asks, that's what you say. Don't embarrass me." His breath was warm against her skin. His hand on her lower back pressed just a bit too hard. Ava nodded, her smile frozen in place. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Guests raised their phones. 7, 6, 5. Daniel's hand tightened. 4, 3, 2. Ava's finger trembled on the trigger. What? Pink smoke exploded into the air. Cheers erupted. People hugged, laughed, and took photos. Daniel lifted Ava off her feet, spinning her around as if they were in a movie. When he set her down, she was dizzy, though not from the spin. "It's a girl," someone shouted. "Danielle," Daniel announced to the crowd. "Her name is Danielle Marie Brooks." Ava heard Emily's sharp intake of breath from across the patio. Their eyes met briefly, and in that glance, Emily saw everything her sister couldn't say. The party continued. Cake was served, gifts were opened, congratulations were offered. Ava moved through it mechanically, her face arranged in the appropriate expressions. But gratitude, excitement. Inside, she felt numb. She kept touching her belly, silently apologizing to the daughter she hadn't been allowed to name. As the afternoon faded into evening, most of the guests moved inside to escape the cooling air. The house was filled with conversation and laughter. Daniel held court in the living room, retelling stories and accepting praise for the beautiful party. Ava slipped into the kitchen, needing a moment alone. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. She didn't hear Daniel approach until he was right behind her. "What did you say to Emily?" Ava jumped, turning to face him. His expression was controlled, but she recognized the anger beneath it. "Nothing. I haven't talked to her much today." "Don't lie to me. I saw how she looked at me when I announced the name." "What did you tell her?" "Daniel, I didn't." He stepped closer, backing her against the counter. His voice was low, meant only for her. "You told her you wanted to leave me, didn't you? You've been complaining behind my back." "No, I swear." "You think you can just walk away? Take my daughter and leave?" His hand slammed down on the counter beside her, making her flinch. A glass teetered and fell, shattering on the tile floor. From the living room, laughter continued. No one heard the crash. Ava's heart hammered. "I'm not trying to leave. I never said that. You better not be. Because if you try, I will make sure you never see that baby again. I have the money, the lawyers, and the reputation. Who do you think they'll believe? The successful executive or the unstable woman who can't even take care of herself?" Tears blurred her vision, but she forced them back. "I understand." "Do you?" "Because I'm starting to wonder if you remember who you belong to." The words hung between them, sharp and clear. Not who you're with or who loves you. Who you belong to. Something inside Ava cracked. Not broke, not yet, but fractured enough that she felt it shift. Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression smoothing instantly. When he looked back at Ava, his tone changed and became lighter. Clean up this glass before someone gets hurt. And come back out soon. People are starting to notice you're gone. He left the kitchen, his footsteps receding into the hum of the party. Ava stood alone, surrounded by broken glass and the fading echoes of laughter. She bent down slowly, picking up the larger pieces, careful not to cut herself. But her mind was somewhere else entirely, calculating distances she'd never let herself measure before. The last guest left around 8 o'clock. Emily lingered, clearly wanting to say something, but Daniel was always nearby, always watching. Finally, she hugged Ava goodbye, whispering, "Call me tomorrow. Please." Ava nodded, unable to form words. After the door closed, silence filled the house. Daniel poured himself bourbon, settling into the living room couch with his phone. Ava began cleaning up, moving methodically through the rooms, collecting plates and cups, bagging trash. "Leave it," Daniel said without looking up. "Come here." Ava set down the trash bag and walked into the living room. Daniel gestured to the couch beside him. "Sit. We need to post something. Thank everyone for coming." He handed her his phone, already open to his social media profile. "Write something nice. Grateful, happy. You know the tone." Ava stared at the blank post field. Her fingers hovered over the screen, but no words came. "Today." She started typing, then stopped. Started again. The words felt foreign, like trying to speak a language she'd forgotten. Daniel's patience evaporated. He snatched the phone back. "You can't even do this one simple thing? What's wrong with you?" "I'm tired, Daniel. It's been a long day." "We're all tired. That's not an excuse." He stood, looming over her. "You know what your problem is? You don't appreciate anything I do for you. The house, the party, the life I've given you. And you repay me by sulking and making me look bad in front of our friends." "I wasn't trying to." "I don't want to hear it." He turned toward the kitchen, grabbing the bourbon bottle. "You'll post that thank you message tonight, and you'll do it properly. And tomorrow, you're going to call Emily and tell her everything's fine. That you're happy. That I'm a good husband." Ava felt something inside her go very still. "What if I don't?" Daniel paused mid-pour. The silence stretched. When he turned to look at her, his eyes were cold. "What did you say? What if I don't post it? What if I don't call Emily?" He set the bottle down carefully, deliberately. "Then you won't see that baby again. I promise you that. I will make sure every judge, every social worker, every person who matters knows you're unstable. Unfit. I'll have documentation, witnesses, everything I need." "To do what? Take my daughter from me?" "She's not your daughter. She's mine. You're just the vessel carrying her." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, which made it worse. "You don't get to walk away from me, Ava. You don't get to change the rules. This is your life now. You agreed to it when you married me." Ava's tears had dried before they could fall. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as her husband. Not as the father of her child. As the person who had systematically dismantled every piece of herself. "Her name is Lena Grace," she said quietly. Daniel's laugh was sharp. "No, it's not. It's Danielle. And you'll call her that, or you won't call her anything at all." He turned back to pour his drink. Ava's eyes moved to the glass centerpiece on the table. A wedding gift from Daniel's mother, heavy crystal shaped like intertwined hearts. She'd always hated it. The weight of it, the pretentious symbolism, the way it reflected light in fractured patterns. Her hand reached for it before she fully registered what she was doing. Time moved strangely. One moment Ava was standing still, the weight of the centerpiece in her hands. The next, Daniel was turning, his glass of bourbon halfway to his lips. His expression shifted, confusion first, then recognition of what she was holding, then the beginning of something that might have been fear. But not fast enough. The first impact was survival. Years of being small, being quiet, being erased, all of it compressed into that single moment. The crystal connected with his temple, and the sound it made was both terrible and final. Daniel's glass slipped from his hand, bourbon splashing across the floor as he stumbled backward. The second impact was everything she'd swallowed. Every apology she'd made for existing. Every time she'd covered a bruise and smiled for a camera. Every moment she'd whispered her daughter's real name in secret because speaking it aloud would cost her everything. Daniel crumpled, his body hitting the floor with a weight that seemed impossible. Ava stood over him, the centerpiece still in her hands, her chest heaving. The house was silent except for her breathing and the soft drip of spilled bourbon mixing with blood. She waited for him to move, to get up, to prove this wasn't real. He didn't move. Pink confetti from the party drifted in a breeze from somewhere, settling on his shirt like snow. The decorations that had celebrated new life now framed death. Ava's hands began to shake. She set the centerpiece down carefully, as if it might break, though it was already stained red. She backed away slowly, her hip hitting the counter, and that's when reality crashed in. What had she done? Her breath came faster, shallower. The room tilted. She pressed her hands against her belly, feeling her daughter move inside her, and the contrast was unbearable. The life she was creating touching the body that had just ended another. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, suspended between before and after, unable to exist fully in either. The music was still playing. That same song about childhood and innocence. Someone's phone, forgotten on the counter, its battery somehow still alive. Sweet child o' mine. Ava laughed once, a sound without humor, and then it died in her throat. She walked to the phone on the wall, old-fashioned, a landline Daniel had insisted on keeping for emergencies. Her fingers were steady as she dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. "I need help," Ava said. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I think I just killed my husband." There was a pause. The operator's training kicked in. "Ma'am, where are you located?" 847 Maple Ridge Drive. "Are you safe? Is anyone else in danger?" Ava looked at Daniel's still form. "No. It's just me now. Stay on the line. Help is on the way." But Ava set the phone down gently, not hanging up, just setting it aside. She slid down the cabinet until she was sitting on the floor, her back against the wood, her hand cradling her belly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not to Daniel. To her daughter. To herself. To whatever came next. And she waited. The responding officers found her exactly where she'd been when she made the call, sitting on the kitchen floor, unmoving. The music had finally stopped. The phone still hung off the counter, the operator's voice calling out into empty air. Officer Marcus Chin entered first, his hand on his weapon but not drawn. He'd been on the force for 12 years and thought he'd seen everything. But this, a house decorated for a celebration, a body surrounded by gender reveal decorations, and a pregnant woman who looked through him rather than at him. This was new. "Ma'am? I'm Officer Chin. Can you stand up for me?" Ava's eyes moved to him slowly, as if waking from a dream. "I called you. I told them I killed him. Let's get you up first, okay? Nice and slow." She let him help her to her feet, swaying slightly. Another officer, Rodriguez, had entered and was checking Daniel's pulse, though the blood pooled beneath his head made the outcome clear. "He's gone," Rodriguez confirmed quietly. Chen guided Ava to the living room, away from the body. "What's your name?" "Ava Brooks." "And the victim?" "Daniel. My husband." She touched her belly. "The father of my baby." Chen noticed the bruises then, fading yellow marks on her upper arms. He exchanged a glance with Rodriguez, who had started photographing the scene. "Can you tell me what happened, Ava?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so flat it unnerved him, "He wouldn't let me name her." Chen frowned. "Name who?" "My daughter." He said her name was Danielle, after him. "But her name is Lena Grace." "I've always known her name is Lena Grace." More officers arrived. The house was filled with people, photographers, evidence techs, the medical examiner. They moved around Ava like water around a stone, documenting everything. The shattered glass. The blood-spattered confetti. The wedding photo is still hanging on the wall, both of them smiling. A detective arrived, a woman named Sarah Pierce who'd worked domestic cases for years. She sat beside Ava, her voice gentle. "We're going to need to take you to the station, ask you some questions. Do you understand?" Ava nodded. "Do you need medical attention? Are you hurt?" "I'm 8 months pregnant." "Does that count as hurt?" Pierce studied her face. "When's the last time you ate?" "This morning. Before the party." "Good. We'll get you something at the station. But first, I need to read you your rights." As Pierce recited the Miranda warning, Ava heard the words without fully processing them. She was watching the evidence techs examine the centerpiece, now sealed in a plastic bag. The crystal hearts that had symbolized eternal love, transformed into an instrument of ending. They handcuffed her gently, aware of her pregnancy, and led her outside. Neighbors had gathered on their lawns, drawn by the flashing lights. Ava recognized some of them from the party earlier. People who'd eaten her food, celebrated her baby, told her how lucky she was. Their faces now showed horror, confusion, and judgment. Ava looked straight ahead as they guided her into the police car. The last thing she saw before they drove away was Emily's car screeching to a halt at the curb, her sister jumping out, screaming her name. But Ava couldn't respond. She was somewhere else already, somewhere beyond the reach of voices. Detective Pierce had Ava placed in an interview room designed for vulnerable witnesses. Softer lighting, a couch instead of metal chairs, a box of tissues on the table. Ava sat with her hands folded over her belly, staring at the wall. An EMT had checked her vitals, confirmed the baby was fine, given her water and crackers. Ava had eaten mechanically, drinking when told to drink, swallowing when told to swallow. Pierce waited until her partner, Detective James Kowalski, arrived before starting the recording. He was older, with kind eyes that had witnessed too much darkness but somehow retained compassion. "Ava, I'm Detective Pierce, and this is Detective Kowalski. We're recording this conversation. You've been read your rights. Do you understand them?" "Yes." "Do you want a lawyer present?" Ava considered this. A lawyer would tell her to stay quiet, to protect herself. But protection felt irrelevant now. "Not yet." Pierce nodded. "Can you tell us what happened tonight?" "Start wherever feels right." Ava's voice was hollow. "We had a gender reveal party. Pink smoke. It's a girl. Everyone was happy." She paused. "He told me her name would be Danielle. I wanted Lena Grace, but he said no. He said I didn't get to choose." "When was this conversation?" "Weeks ago. When we found out about the baby." He just decided. He always decides everything. Kowalski leaned forward. What happened after the party ended? Everyone left. He wanted me to post on social media. Thank you, everyone. I couldn't do it fast enough. He got angry. She touched the fading bruises on her arm without seeming to realize it. He said if I didn't obey, I'd never see my baby. That he'd take her from me. That I belonged to him. Pierce caught Kowalski's eye. Did he hurt you, Ava? Define hurt. Ava's laugh was bitter. He never broke bones. Never left marks where people could see. He was smarter than that. But he did hurt you? He controlled me. Every decision, every word, every moment of my life. Does that hurt? I don't even know anymore. The detective spent the next 2 hours carefully extracting her story. The progression of control. The isolation from friends and family. The escalating threats about the baby. Ava answered every question with the same flat effect, as if narrating someone else's life. When Pierce asked about the actual moment of Daniel's death, Ava's composure finally cracked slightly. I picked up the centerpiece. From our wedding. And I just couldn't be his anymore. I couldn't let my daughter grow up watching me disappear. Where did you strike him? His head. Twice. Maybe 3 times. I don't remember exactly. What were you thinking when you did it? Ava met Pierce's eyes directly for the first time. I was thinking her name is Lena Grace. And he was never going to let me say it. After the interview, they took her to the store. She'd be arraigned in the morning, formally charged. Pierce requested she be placed in a cell alone, with regular medical checks given her pregnancy. As they were processing her, Kowalski pulled Pierce aside. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen abuse victims kill their abusers. This is a textbook except... Except what? The timing. Why at the party? Why not in private? Pierce had been wondering the same thing. Maybe because the party made it real. He announced her name publicly. Claimed the baby as his in front of everyone. Maybe that was the final taking. Meanwhile, the investigative team was at the Brooks house, gathering evidence. They found Ava's phone, the tracking software Daniel had installed. They found financial records showing he controlled all their accounts. They discovered a folder on Daniel's computer labeled Insurance, screenshots of arguments, notes about Ava's unstable behavior, emails to a lawyer discussing custody options if they separated. Emily arrived at the station at midnight, frantic. Pierce met with her in a conference room. Where is she? Is the baby okay? Please, I need to see her. The baby's fine. Ava's fine, physically. But she's been charged with murder. You can't see her until after the arraignment. Emily's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. I have recordings. Messages. I've been documenting everything because I knew something terrible was going to happen. Pierce listened to the messages, reading through Emily's careful notes. Dates, times, observations. A pattern emerging clearly over months. Why didn't you report this earlier? Emily's voice broke. Report what? That my sister's husband was too controlling? That he made decisions for her? I tried to get her to leave. She wouldn't. She was terrified he'd take the baby. She had money, lawyers. She felt trapped. This will help her case, Pierce said gently. The pattern of abuse, the witnesses who noticed. It builds context. Will it be enough? Pierce couldn't answer that. The trial began 4 months later, on a cold February morning. Ava had given birth while in custody, a daughter, delivered under guard at the hospital. Emily had been there, had held Lena Grace Brooks while Ava was shackled to the bed. Ava had been allowed to hold her daughter for 2 hours before they took her back to jail. 2 hours to memorize a face, to whisper the name she'd fought for, to promise things she wasn't sure she could keep. Now she sat at the defense table, wearing a borrowed navy dress, her body still healing from childbirth. Emily sat in the front row, holding 9-week-old Lena, a constant reminder of what Ava stood to lose. The prosecution was led by District Attorney James Moreland, a man known for his conviction rate and his lack of sympathy for murderers hiding behind abuse claims. He presented Daniel as a successful, beloved member of the community. He showed the jury photos of the crime scene, the blood, the murder weapon, Ava's calm confession. This wasn't self-defense, Moreland argued in his opening. This was premeditation. The victim's back was turned. He wasn't attacking her. She made a choice, picked up a weapon, and ended his life. That's not survival. That's murder. The defense attorney, Margaret Walsh, was a veteran of domestic violence cases. She'd taken Ava's case pro bono after reading about it, recognizing something she'd seen too many times before. Ava Brooks lived in a prison, Walsh told the jury. Not one with bars, but one just as real. For 3 years, she was controlled, isolated, and threatened. And when she was carrying his child, that control became absolute. Daniel Brooks told her he would take her baby if she didn't obey. The night he died, he just spent hours displaying her like a possession, claiming their daughter as his property, reinforcing that Ava had no voice, no choice, no escape. Over the following weeks, both sides built their cases. The prosecution called Daniel's co-workers, who testified to his charm and professionalism. His mother wept on the stand, describing him as a devoted son planning to be a devoted father. But then the defense began calling witnesses. Emily took the stand, her voice steady despite her fear. She described the changes she'd noticed in Ava. The friend who testified that Ava had stopped attending their weekly dinners after Daniel insisted he needed her home. The colleague who'd seen Daniel checking Ava's phone during a work party, scrolling through her messages while she sat beside him, silent. The domestic violence expert who explained the psychology of coercive control. How it doesn't require physical violence to be devastating. How victims are systematically stripped of autonomy until they no longer recognize themselves. The forensic tech who'd examined Ava's phone and found the tracking software, the monitored messages, the evidence of constant surveillance. Most damning was Daniel's own documentation. The insurance folder his lawyer had advised him to keep. Reading those notes aloud, Walsh let the jury see Daniel through his own words, Ava becoming increasingly difficult to manage. I may need to demonstrate consequences. Discussed custody strategy with Harrison. Confirmed we can document mental instability if needed. Baby girl will solidify my position. Naming her Danielle, must establish this publicly before Ava can object. The jury's expressions shifted as they listened. The successful executive began to look less like a victim and more like an architect of control. Ava took the stand on the 9th day of trial. Walsh had prepared her extensively, but nothing could truly prepare someone to narrate their own unraveling in front of strangers. Moreland's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Brooks, you claim your husband was controlling. Yet you had a cell phone, correct? Yes. You could have called for help at any time? He monitored everything. He would have known. But you could have called the police. Your sister. A hotline. You chose not to. Ava's voice was quiet. You don't understand what it's like. He made me believe I had no options. That if I left, I'd lose everything, including my daughter. So instead, you killed him. I didn't plan to, but you did. You picked up a heavy object and struck him. Multiple times. While his back was turned. That's not fear, Mrs. Brooks. That's rage. Ava met his eyes. You're right. It was rage. 3 years of rage. 3 years of being erased, of being told I didn't matter, that my thoughts and feelings and choices were irrelevant. 3 years of watching myself disappear. And when he told me he'd take my daughter, name her after himself like she was just another possession, something broke. Or maybe something finally unbroken. The courtroom went silent. Even Moreland seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw honesty. So you admit you killed him in anger, not fear. I killed him because I couldn't be his anymore. And I couldn't let my daughter become the way I was. Walsh used redirect to soften the impact, walking Ava through the cumulative weight of abuse, the way it builds until the body reacts before the mind can catch up. But everyone knew the prosecution had scored points. The closing arguments came down to competing narratives. Moreland painted Ava as calculated and cold, a woman who'd grown tired of her marriage and chosen murder over divorce. Walsh painted Daniel as a man who'd systematically destroyed his wife's sense of self, who'd driven her to a breaking point any reasonable person might have reached. This isn't about whether Ava Brooks killed Daniel Brooks, Walsh told the jury. She did. She's never denied it. This is about whether you can look at the life she was forced to live, the threats she faced, the absolute control he wielded, and understand that what happened that night wasn't murder. It was a woman fighting for her survival and her daughter's future. The jury deliberated for 3 days. The waiting was worse than anything that had come before. Ava sat in her cell, staring at photos Emily had sent of Lena, sleeping, yawning, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. Every image was both a blessing and an agony. Emily visited daily, bringing news from outside. The media had latched onto the case, dividing along predictable lines. Some outlets portrayed Ava as a cold-blooded killer. Others saw her as a symbol of what happened when women were pushed beyond endurance. Think pieces multiplied. Hashtags trended. Everyone had an opinion about a woman they'd never met, a life they couldn't begin to understand. On the 3rd day, word came that the jury had reached a verdict. Ava was transported to the courthouse, her hands shaking as deputies removed her from the van. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Emily sat in her usual spot, Lena in her arms. Their eyes met, and Emily mouthed, "I love you." Ava nodded, unable to speak. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The jury filed in, their faces carefully neutral. Ava tried to read them, searching for some hint, but found nothing. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with gray hair, stood. "We have, Your Honor." On the charge of murder in the 1st degree, how do you find? Not guilty. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ava's knees weakened. Walsh gripped her arm, steadying her. On the charge of murder in the 2nd degree, how do you find? Not guilty. Another wave of reaction. Moreland's face tightened. On the charge of voluntary manslaughter, how do you find? The pause. The foreperson looked directly at Ava. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel slammed down repeatedly. Ava barely heard it. Manslaughter. Not murder. It meant they'd believed her, at least partially. They'd understood she hadn't planned it, that something in that moment had been beyond her control. But it was still a conviction. She would still go to prison. Walsh leaned close. This is the best outcome we could have hoped for. With your history with the abuse documented, we can argue for leniency at sentencing." Ava nodded numbly. Behind her, Emily was crying, clutching Lena close. Ava turned in her seat, looking at her daughter. Lena was awake, her dark eyes, Daniel's eyes, though Ava tried not to think about that, staring at nothing in particular. "Her name is Lena Grace," Ava said, loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "I just wanted everyone to know. Her name is Lena Grace Brooks." The judge paused in his attempts to restore order, looking at Ava with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition of something he'd never had to face. "We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for sentencing," he said finally. "Until then, Mrs. Brooks will remain in custody." As they led her away, Ava felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, she wasn't sure she remembered what that felt like. But something like relief. Like the truth, however terrible, had finally been spoken aloud. Sentencing day arrived with spring rain. Ava was brought into the courtroom wearing the same borrowed dress, her hair pulled back simply. She looked older than her 30 years, aged by everything she'd endured and everything she'd done. Walsh had prepared a case for leniency. Character witnesses testified, Emily, friends from before Daniel, even Ava's former boss who described her as compassionate and thoughtful. A psychologist who'd evaluated Ava explained the long-term effects of coercive control, how it rewires the brain's threat response. Moreland argued for the maximum sentence. The defendant took a life. Regardless of her circumstances, she made a choice. Justice demands accountability. The judge, Harold Brennan, was known for being tough but fair. He'd presided over domestic violence cases before, had seen the full spectrum of human cruelty and human breaking points. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "would you like to address the court before I pronounce the sentence?" Ava stood slowly. She'd written something, but the paper stayed folded in her pocket. Instead, she spoke from her heart. "I know I killed Daniel. I know that's something I can never undo. His mother lost her son. His friends lost someone they cared about. And my daughter will grow up without a father. I carry all of that with me. But I also know that if I'd stayed silent, if I'd stayed small, I would have disappeared completely. And my daughter would have grown up watching it happen. She would have learned that women exist to be controlled, that love means obedience, that your voice doesn't matter. I don't know if what I did was right. I don't think it was. But I know I couldn't be his anymore. And I know that her name is Lena Grace, and she deserves to be her own person, not just an extension of someone else's ego. Whatever sentence you give me, I'll serve it. I'll use that time to become someone my daughter can be proud of when she's old enough to understand. I'll use it to make sure that what I did, what he drove me to do, means something." She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Brennan reviewed his notes, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of difficult wisdom. "I've read the evidence in this case extensively. The documentation of abuse, the pattern of control, the expert testimony. I've also considered the violence of the act itself and the fact that a life was taken. In cases of domestic violence, we often talk about cycles, cycles of abuse, cycles of trauma. This case represents a tragic collision between those cycles and a breaking point. Mrs. Brooks, you were subjected to years of psychological abuse. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it provides crucial context. On the charge of voluntary manslaughter, I sentence you to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 years. Given your lack of prior criminal history, the documented abuse, and the exceptional circumstances, I'm recommending you be placed in a facility with resources for trauma survivors and parenting programs. Ava absorbed the words. 6 years minimum before she could even hope for parole. Lena would be in first grade. She'd miss her daughter's first steps, first words, first day of school. But she'd be alive. And Lena would grow up knowing her mother's name and her own name, and that sometimes survival looks like choices no one should have to make. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said quietly. As they led her from the courtroom, Emily stood, Lena in her arms. The baby was 5 months old now, growing quickly, developing her own personality. Ava paused, and the deputies allowed her one moment. Emily brought Lena close. Ava touched her daughter's cheek, memorizing the softness, the warmth, the way Lena's mouth curved like she was dreaming of something pleasant. "Lena Grace," Ava whispered, "Mommy loves you. Remember that, okay? No matter what anyone tells you. Remember that I loved you enough to fight for your name." Lena made a soft cooing sound. It wasn't recognition, not really. But Ava let herself believe it was. 3 weeks later, Ava was transferred to a women's correctional facility 2 hours outside the city. Emily visited every month, bringing Lena, documenting her growth through photos and videos. Ava watched her daughter learn to sit up, to crawl, to walk. She heard her first word through a phone, "Mama." Ava cried for an hour after that call ended. Inside, she attended therapy groups, worked in the library, and took college courses online. She wrote letters to Lena that Emily saved for when she was older, letters explaining, apologizing, hoping. And she waited. 6 years passed slowly. Seasons changed beyond the prison walls, marked by Emily's monthly visits and Lena's growth from infant to child. Ava saw her daughter's first school photos, birthday parties captured on Emily's phone, artwork that Lena made in kindergarten. "She asks about you," Emily said during one visit when Lena was 5. "She knows you're her mother. I've told her age-appropriate things. That you had to be away, but you love her. Does she remember me at all? She remembers your voice. I play her the recordings of you singing lullabies. And she looks at your picture every night before bed." Ava's parole hearing came just after Lena's 6th birthday. She sat before the parole board, a different woman than the one who'd entered prison. She'd completed every program offered, maintained perfect behavior, and worked toward a degree in social work. "Mrs. Brooks," the board chair asked, "do you take responsibility for your actions?" "Completely. I killed my husband. That's a truth I live with every day. I also know now that I had other options, even if I couldn't see them at the time. I could have reached out more forcefully. I could have left earlier. But the person I was then couldn't see past her fear. If you're released, what are your plans?" "To be a mother to my daughter. To rebuild the relationship I've missed 6 years of. And to help other women recognize the signs of abuse before they reach the breaking point I did." The board deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the chair's expression was neutral. "Mrs. Brooks, your parole is granted, effective in 30 days. You'll be under supervision for 3 years, with mandatory therapy and community service requirements. Violation of any terms will result in return to custody." Ava couldn't speak. She simply nodded, tears streaming down her face. The day of her release, Emily brought Lena to the prison gates. The little girl clutched her aunt's hand, nervous and excited. She'd grown tall, with Ava's dark hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose. When Ava walked through those gates, free for the first time in 6 years, she stopped several feet away, afraid to move closer without permission. "Lena," she said softly, The girls studied her. "You're my mama." I'm so sorry I've been gone. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be." Lena thought about this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old can muster. Then she let go of Emily's hand and ran to Ava, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. Ava dropped to her knees, holding her daughter, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her. "You're so big," she whispered. "You're so beautiful. And your name is Lena Grace, and I love you more than anything in this world." "I know," Lena said simply. "Aunt Emily told me. She said you fought really hard for my name." "I did. I would do anything for you." Lena pulled back slightly, looking at her mother with Daniel's eyes but Ava's spirit. "Even go to jail?" Ava had to smile through her tears. "Even that." They went to Emily's house, where she'd prepared a room for Ava. Slowly, carefully, they began building a life. Ava got a job at a non-profit helping domestic violence survivors. She attended Lena's school events, helped with homework, learned her daughter's favorite books and foods and games. The story didn't end perfectly. There were hard conversations as Lena grew older, questions about her father that Ava answered as honestly as she could. There were nightmares and therapy sessions and moments when Ava wondered if Lena would ever fully forgive her. But there were also soccer games and birthday parties and quiet evenings reading together. There were school plays where Lena searched the audience until she found Ava's face, and then her smile would bloom. There were nights when Lena would crawl into Ava's bed whispering, "Tell me again about my name." And Ava would hold her close and say, "Your name is Lena Grace. It means light and blessing. I chose it because I knew you would bring light into the world. And no one, not even me, not even when I was at my worst, could ever take that from you." Years later, a storytelling channel called The Witness Wall would tell Ava's story. This video would accumulate millions of views, thousands of comments. Some would condemn her. Some would understand. Most would simply bear witness to a truth that's uncomfortable but necessary. Sometimes survival looks like violence, and sometimes love means fighting for something as simple as a name. If stories like this remind you why truth matters, why names matter, why voices matter, stay with us. The Witness Wall exists for stories that refuse to be.
Thanks for tuning in to The Witness Wall. If you're new to this channel, kindly like and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.